Good to see you all here. I know we have some people joining us online as well.
Again, too. When your report came out, Khalistan, a project of Pakistan, there were 50 scholars who wrote to MacDonald-Laurier Institute requesting that the report be retracted. And amongst those were supporters of Kashmiri separatism, like Dr. Hafsa Ganjwal and Dr. Idrisa Pandit. And, there's been an active effort to link Khalistan with Kashmiri separatism, but this K2 strategy has never been more apparent than it has in the immediate recent times following the India-Pakistan conflict. Would you like to say some words about that? I mean, Banu's statements like long live Khalistan-Pakistan friendship, although in the past he said, we have no support from Pakistan. This is like an entirely independent movement. But now...
Yes, and of course he's also said the opposite, hasn't he? There's Banu's problem is there is a long paper trail of what he's actually said. I mean, and for example, I think I quoted it in that article, there's his letter to Imran Khan when he was Prime Minister, pledging the loyalty of Khalistan supporting Sikhs who will come to the aid of Pakistan and fight to the death for Pakistan because Pakistan is such a good friend, which of course is also a matter of record. I mean, where exactly were Khalistani militants supposed to launch attacks on India from, if not from Pakistan? There's nobody else that neighbors India where you can come across the border with guns and launch attacks. Pakistan is it. Without Pakistan to provide a safe haven, medical care, training, a place to hang, the Khalistan movement would never have been able to launch the armed insurgency which came across that very border from Pakistan in the 1980s and early 90s. Now, you mentioned the link between the Kashmiri militants and the Khalistani militants on the theory, obviously, that the enemy of my enemy is my friend. This is a case in point in the story of Parmar, the Air India bomber. Canada's worst mass murderer finally met his end at a little village in Punjab called Kangarayan at the hands of the local police, most of them Sikhs, by the way, in 1992, October of 1992. And there were 6 men in 2 Maruti cars, heavily armed. 2 of those men, with Parmar, when in his final shootout with the police, he had grenades, by the way. He was still throwing grenades right to the end. 2 of the men with him were determined conclusively to be Pakistani ISI agents, including a gentleman named Inkitab Zia, and he was carrying the money. And he was in cahoots with and accompanied by the junior Pakistani ISI agent, who was a Kashmiri militant. And the 2 of them were accompanying Parmar on who knows what mission. They certainly were armed to the teeth, then a rocket launcher in the car, as well as a machine gun. And Pakistan confirmed their identities, by the way. Those are not in dispute. But they said they were tourists. They were terrorists, they were tourists. Of course, doesn't every tourist have a rocket launcher in their car? And a thick wad of a couple of thousand US dollar bills, $100 bills? So, yes, the link with Kashmir is not just topical because of current events between India and Pakistan, but it's true going all the way back then. And its origin is of course, it all goes back to the 1971 Bangladesh war, doesn't it? We better not get into that, but long story short, Pakistan ever after the humiliating surrender of 90,000 Pakistani troops to the Indian army, Pakistan was determined to get its revenge by breaking off a piece of India, just as India had broken off East Pakistan and turned it into Bangladesh. So that was the motivating force. That was the force which united the various groups who had a grudge against India, the Kashmiris, to be included, and caused them to make common cause in the battle to, as they put it, bleed India.
And I might add that Sikhs for Justice also wrote a letter to China. They've sent several letters to China supporting them on their claims on Indian territory as well. And that also seems to be a growing nexus.
Yes. I should say a word, by the way, if you have a moment, about,
Of course.
They're still asking for a retraction. They really didn't like that article that you mentioned because it gave the impression that the support of Pakistan had been, as I put it, I think, an essential additive to the Khalistan project, as I just described. And they're still asking for that retraction, as it turned out. They initially, you mentioned the scholars had written this angry letter saying that my article had cast aspersions, wide aspersions, they said, upon a racialized community, suggesting that I had cast aspersions on, I guess, Sikhs as a people or something. But strangely, although they lectured me about academic rigor, they never identified any of these aspersions. And they also said I made a whole lot of false accusations. And they never identified any of these false accusations. So it's a mystery what they thought they were. They certainly haven't shared them with their readers. And in an article appealing to academic rigor, that's pretty weird, because the first rule of academic rigor is you got to show your evidence, but they show none. And I responded to that, as you may know. I think I repeated this to you because you called me about it. I challenged them to say, okay, where's the goods? Where is the evidence for these aspersions on the Sikhs and these false accusations and so forth? You know, step up. If you've got it, show it. Not a peep. Not one of them said a thing. I contacted one, a learned professor, supposedly, at San Diego, I believe, and he said, Professor Pashora. And I said, well, you know, why did you sign this trash? You got no evidence. Do you have evidence? Is there something I should know? And he said, he just didn't have any answer. Well, you have to call the guy that organized this letter. The letter was organized to make it seem that the story was wrong without showing a shred of evidence. And on that basis, that is to say no basis at all, they continue. They haven't completely dropped a lawsuit. Their lawsuits in this business go on forever, as you know. I've had, my record is 7 years. I had one that was sitting there, oh, we're going to sue, we're suing you, we're really suing you very hard, we're suing you for lots of money. But they never actually took me to court. That lasted for 7 years. And this current one, 2 years after that initial effort to get a retraction from me and from the think tank that published the piece, the McDonald Laurier Institute, 2 years later, they still don't want to go to court, which is educational, isn't it? I mean, they've won the right to go to court. We tried to have the thing thrown out at first blush, without even a hearing, and the judge said, no, give them their day in court. They've got a right, if they can prove any of this, then give them a chance to have their day in court. Okay, so where are they? They walked away for 2 years. And now they're saying, well, we still don't want a trial, but what we'd like is for you to give us a victory, to donate one without a hearing, without a trial. We'd like you to just give up and give us a retraction, and if you'll print a retraction, then we will let you off the hook on the damages and the costs, and we'll cut you a really good deal. It's not really a very good deal at all, is it? So I don't think they're going to enjoy any success. But it shows, once again, they're still fighting. They're still fighting to obscure the truth. That's the fundamental mission, is to make sure that their disinformation prevails and that the truth does not.
Okay, I know that was a bit of a long clip, but I think it was important to illustrate the rampant disinformation which Sanjay and Puneet and Terry as well keep countering very persistently. So with that, Sanjay, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you very much, Poonamji. And thank you to everybody, first of all, for taking time out to come here to listen to us and commemorate, what will be a very tearful 40th anniversary. I'm truly thankful to Utsavji, to Poonamji and HinduACTion for having arranged this. I've been traveling all across North America, trying to advocate that nations and governments and the police and the people need to remember that Air India 182 Kanishka was the world's worst aviation tragedy, act of terrorism until 9/11 came into being. It is still till today the largest bombing of any aircraft. It was coordinated across continents by the Khalistanis, and I lost my entire family in that, and I was orphaned as a teenager. Utsavji, and I'll just play a short presentation while I'm speaking. I'm Sanjay Lazar. I lost my entire family in the Air India 182 Kanishka, and this is, the story of my life. I failed my 12th standard, and that happened in June of 1985. And we were all to go on a holiday to Toronto, and I got my results 2 days before our departure, and they wanted to cancel that trip. The shock and horror of me failing upset my family no end. My dad didn't want to go, my stepmom didn't want to go. I said, no, please go. And I'll submit my papers for evaluation and I'll stay behind. It's only 10 or 12 days. It's not that I'm a 3-year-old child or something like that. My dad was obviously the in-flight supervisor. He worked in Air India for 24 years before that, and he was operating that flight along with a lot of friends, and they were all taking their families along. So like I said, I got my results on the 10th of June 1985. My family left on the 12th of June 1985, and on the 23rd of June, maybe after 1:30 Indian time, maybe 2 o'clock, I got a call from a very dear, close family friend that your dad wants you in London, come to London. I packed a bag, I didn't know where we were going. I had my passport, landed up in London, and that night we stayed at the Heathrow Penta. There was a bomb scare there. We had to evacuate the hotel at 3 in the morning. It was the Khalistanis again. And finally I reached Cork, and as a young kid, 16, 17-year-old, alone, I began the process of looking for bodies, identifying in the Cork Regional Hospital. It's something I wish on nobody. No 17-year-old, no 70-year-old, to see, to wake up every morning and wait for the ships that would come in with the naval, and then the bodies to arrive at the hospital. It was a devastating tragedy, and it haunts me till this day. I have not recovered. However, the world has moved on, and what hurts the most has been the revisionist history that we've heard of in the last few years. What hurts the most is there have been many tragedies, many terrorist acts, even after the bombing of Kanishka, and people seem to have forgotten the scale and the intensity of this tragedy. This was a vile act. 82 babies and children under the age of 13 were murdered. There were 331 people, 329 in the aircraft and 2 in Narita, Tokyo. So out of 331, you had 82 kids, and that's something that, you know, becomes so difficult to accept or understand or imagine. This is what, you know, and this was, like I said, the worst until 9/11 took place, and even today is, you know, something that's shocking. Next one. This is my family and my baby sister, my mom and my dad, who I was orphaned as a teen. Next. Yeah. So, for those that do not remember or those that may have forgotten, Arjab Singh Bagri, one of the conspirators, in New York, in Madison Square Garden, a few months before this bombing took place, had promised to, you know, kill 50,000 Hindus. He would not rest until he killed 50,000. The videos are online, they're live, you don't need to see that. The Secret Service, the United States Secret Service, had 2 weeks before the bombing visited Talvinder Singh Parmar in Vancouver, and they are monitored by CSIS. They were under you know, surveillance to warn him that Mr. Rajiv Gandhi was visiting Washington DC to meet President Reagan for the Festival of India, and therefore don't do any hanky-panky. The CSIS and the RCMP tracked Parmar and his cronies into a forest in Vancouver on an island. They test-fired a bomb, 3 weeks. There were wiretaps for 4 months, from March to June, where they had recordings of these guys planning this. The Indian government sent 31 aid memoirs to the Foreign Office in Canada, as well as to the RCMP and CSIS, warning them that there was an imminent bomb threat to either the Air India aircraft or State Bank of India. The June 1st telex, you know, also sent that this is going to be a bombing of an Air India flight. And in those days, we only had one Air India flight to Canada. So everyone knew this is before the bombing. After the bombing, you know, we all know that 15 years there was no action. We went for the first anniversary, there was a memorial. Other than that, nothing. And I kept writing to various governments, whether it was the Irish, the Indian, and the Canadian governments. The Canadian government did not even bother. They would, you know, reply with some homilies every now and then. The actual tragedy came about when the criminal trial of these guys happened. Of course, like Terry rightly mentioned, Talvinder Singh Parmar was shot and killed by the Punjab police in Punjab when he was crossing over from Pakistan with his ISI handlers. There is no doubt that this is a Pakistan-Khalistan project. Khalistan is a pet project of the ISI and Pakistan. I attended the trials in Vancouver, and I remember the number of witnesses that were threatened or killed or just disappeared and or recanted on the stand. These guys were so pervasive within Canadian society that people were even scared to talk. It was a mountain of mistakes, colossal mistakes. The justice, you know, just was not served. And again, when the trial verdict came out, I lost my family again. You know, all the 331 died again, because here I sat literally 15 feet away from the killers or the accused. And they were grinning right through on the last day for the verdict, because they knew they'd eliminated everyone, including their own mistresses, who had given statements stating that they borrowed my car, they went to bomb the aircraft, they placed the bombs on the aircraft. So there's a lot of history behind this which is recorded. I also attended John Major inquiry. I got individual standing. So I've been an advocate trying to ensure that the truth comes out, that justice is served, and those that are responsible are brought to bear. I'm here today to also point out that Khalistan equals to Pakistan equals to Islamist terrorism. We need to understand that this plagues North America. This is not an Indian problem. This is a global problem. This problem is in Canada, in the United States, in Europe, in UK, and unless you tackle one, you can't tackle the other. They are like co-joined twins, and that's why I want to impress upon, whether it's the diaspora here, whether it's organizations in the US or Canada, or whether it's the government as well, to look into this, because this is something that impacts all of us. I would hate to see another Sanjay waiting by the site of a terrorist attack at any stage. I don't want to see any kid or anybody else go through that. Very important here for me to distinguish between the Khalistani cult and the Islamist cults, and the wonderful Sikhs that we have in our country and across America and the UK. They are wonderful people. They follow the teachings of Gurudev, as well as they've brought pride to our country. They've brought laurels in whether it's sports or in every field. Khalistanis are bloodthirsty people. We need to understand they have no religion other than bloodletting. So that's a completely different story. Also, I'd like to point out, which many people around the world forget. We've had the Pew Research Center 2021 report, which actually I'll read from here. It states that 95% of Sikhs in India are very proud to be Indians. 93% of Punjabi Sikhs were very proud to live in Punjab. And 70% of Indian Sikhs believe that a person who disrespects India cannot be a Sikh. This shows a very strong nationalistic sentiment amongst them. Next. Khalistan and Kashmir have been ISI projects for over 50 years, and their support has grown amongst all the terror groups of the world. Pakistan has harbored terror camps of Islamist groups, Khalistani terrorism, Al-Qaeda. Where was Osama bin Laden found by the US? In Pakistan. Where is Hafiz Syed? In Pakistan. You can list out where we talk of, Hardeep Singh Nijjar, who was assassinated or killed, or who died, strangely. But the Globe and Mail itself has done an investigative study, and they've got him on the terrace of a ISI training camp in Islamabad. We've also got images of Beant Singh's killer. So we all know the link between Pakistan, Khalistan, and the Islamist terror. I go back now to the other aspect of this, is that we look at the impact of the bombing of whether it's 9/11 or whether it's Kanishka, whether it's Lockerbie, on the world. But we're all forgetting that there are victims who exist separately, like me, and some of the others that we've seen in the videos here, and we will see going further. We need to address these issues. Justice needs to be seen and needs to be seen to be done, both. Until the victims are not assuaged by justice, by the killers of the Kanishka roam free even today in Canada. We've seen even the 1986 plot in New York to bomb the third Air India aircraft, the 111, was arrested in the US, jailed in the US, and then Canada extradited him, and today he's back up to his tricks there. So we need to look at all these aspects. The last point I'd like to make about Pakistan, there are photographs of Dr. Fai, who is a known ISI operator in Washington, D.C., who literally funds and supports Islamists and Khalistani terrorists in this terrorist world even today. China is another new entrant into this field. I don't know if many of you have followed the news, but in the last month, a group of Chinese tourists were caught on the Nepalese border with Sikhs for Justice material, Khalistani material, which brings an entirely new angle. And they had also visited Pakistan prior to that. So it shows that the China, Pakistan, Khalistan Islamist angle is growing. And it's something that North America needs to worry about, considering the large percentage of both Chinese and Pakistanis who live here and could create havoc with the Khalistanis. This is not scaremongering, or you can never be too safe when it comes to terrorism. We've learned that bitterly in America. We've learned that in India every day. We live that. We've recently seen what's happened in across in San Francisco as well, and in other parts of the U.S. So I look upon America to look at this very strongly. Don't lose sight of what we have. I've written my first book on Angel's Wings, which covers my life and my journey along with the bombing. My journey with John Major's inquiry, the trial, identification of bodies. My second book, The Blood of Angels, will be out this fall, which will actually cover a historical perspective from Operation Blue Star, Mrs. Gandhi's killing, up to Hardeep Singh Nijjar's death. And we need to appreciate that this issue is very much alive. 40 years later, we've not put this to bed. And I hope that the Indian government, the Canadian government, and the US government act strongly, and either one of the three or all three in concert together to ensure that this never happens again on our shores. Thank you.
So I also wanted to add that, because I know, Sanjay, you mentioned a little bit, like, had this been considered a Canadian tragedy. So when the Air India plane went down in 1985, the Prime Minister then, Brian Mulroney, he called Indian Prime Minister Rajiv Gandhi to condole India's loss. This, when 329 passengers perished, 280 of them were Canadian citizens of Indian descent, but they were Canadian citizens. And it wasn't until 20 years later that Prime Minister Paul Martin acknowledged, make no mistake, the flight may have been Air India's. It may have taken place off the coast of Ireland, but this is a Canadian tragedy. So it took 20 years for the Canadian government to say that.
If I may, sorry. I met Paul Martin and Stephen Harper on the 20th anniversary in Ireland, and I remember telling him, if this was a plane full of white people, we would have had justice by the second year. It's because they were all brown people that we didn't get justice. And it took Harper to become Prime Minister the following year. I think it was 2006-07 when he actually appointed Justice Major, just as an aside.
Right.
Thank you.
So we'll go next to Puneet. So Puneet is a brilliant scholar. He's a great researcher, and he's unearthed a lot of facts that we didn't know. And Puneet, I think you came up with a new, a new piece of evidence that hadn't been seen previously. Some hard evidence.
Which one?
Weren't there some air tickets that you unearthed?
Yeah.
Okay.
I found the the air tickets that were used to plant the bomb. So, well, this is a huge tragedy, and you can talk so much about it, and you can just pick so many facets of it, which would be shocking and would engage you. But I think in all this tragedy, who did their job well? Because it's blunders. Actually, FBI did an excellent job. So I think that is a very pertinent thing to point out. And second, this can be done anywhere, but I think it's pertinent that we discuss here, because Khalistanis are actually becoming a very, very grave threat to the United States as well. And I'm wearing a tricolor turban of India, and I'm because it's more for Khalistanis than anybody else, because I feel they besmirched our turban and our tradition. So it's a pointer to that. But I'm a proud American citizen. This when the Khalistanis in 1985, when they were planning to bomb the plane, around the same time, the Prime Minister of India, Rajiv Gandhi, was visiting the United States. And there was a parallel cell in New York of, Gurpratap Singh Birk, who were trying to assassinate the Prime Minister. But the FBI was so much on its toes. They got on camera how they were trying to, bomb the parliament and poison the water and kill thousands and do And that guy was sent to 17 years of prison. That immediately set a deterrent that you cannot get away with this stuff. Whereas in Canada, it was a free reign. So, it's so fascinating. For example, just to take one example, I think his name is Andrew McCarthy. And he is the prosecutor who prosecuted the 1993 World Trade Center bombing. And when he looked at the Canadian case, he was like, I cannot believe that this is happening. So in this, the judge agrees, that, okay, the witness that you have brought to me is very credible. The evidence that she is presenting is very credible. She is giving a written testimony, and, it's very damning. But she's so terrified that she would not testify in front of the court. And he was like, that's why I throw it away. So in any sane judicial system, if you try to threaten the witnesses, as a defense, you should suffer. But in Canada, the prosecution suffers. So, they made a complete mockery of it. And, what's so shocking? So, for example, in 1985, this bombing happened, and the FBI is helping them. And these people were so belligerent and, so shameless and so unafraid that you would say, okay, if they bomb, they'll probably like to go silent. But what was found because of FBI wiretaps, months after, there was another plan. This was called, I think, the Montreal plan. So what they did was from Toronto to India, they bombed the plane. They were trying to do the same. From New York, they would put the bombs and they would do it. And there was, because of FBI, they got the wiretaps. So these people were discussing on camera, on wiretaps, that just months after, we have to do this. Now this case went to the court. The Canadian system were like, okay, you have to tell who was the informer because of this, that you got the wiretaps. Not that the wiretaps are wrong. And they were like, these people are, they will kill. These people are very dangerous. They have already committed mass murder. Then they were like, no, this is not accepted. In the end, what they were like a compromise, they brought the informer, but he was like, his face was covered. But again, that was thrown out. Then there was another Hamilton conspiracy. And it was the same thing, they found these people on wiretap, and it was the same people who bombed, these women and children. In this, they are discussing how, they would bomb the Indian parliament and how they would abduct and everything. It was caught on camera. But again, they had hidden the name of the informant from where they were getting this information. And the defense says, this is a violation, that we don't have this information. So this case was again thrown out. So this is, they made a complete mockery of the Canadian justice system. And, this is why it happened. So actually, from the FBI's perspective, if we want to deal with terrorism, and how to deal, so I think this served as a very good example. And they did everything that was in their hands, to help, but it fell off. There is another, very interesting snippet of this. So they killed the main witness. And again, the main witness, he had given a sworn testimony. He had a, attempt on his life. He was crippled, and then and everything was right, but his evidence was not allowed to be, put in the court. Even though that evidence was being verified from 3 different sides, which had no interaction with the other. So one was another FBI informant who said, okay, the bomber had told me, and, and he was like, if I go to Canada, I'll be killed. So I don't trust the Canadian, law enforcement or the police. So they had to pay him money, you get your own security. But when he got his own security and came to Canada, they were like, we cannot accept your, testimony because you have been paid. Now, this is so outrageous because he had given the same testimony when he was in America, when he had no risk to his life. So he was giving the same testimony that he had given in America. But, when he came to Canada, they're like, you have been paid, so you're a paid witness. So I would just really recommend some of the things that are so outrageous, most of the people I see, they have very puzzled looks on their face. This is nothing. I can go on and on and on. But there is a great book by Terry Milewski, and in Indian we have an expression, "Gagar mein sagar," which is basically you put like an ocean into an earthen pot. So he worked for 40 years for he was the face of the Canadian television. So in that you have very limited time, and you really have to be succinct. So in just like a small, like 200-page book that you can read in like 3-4 hours, he's really put the case well, and you get to know everything. So it's an outrage, and from these people who at least in America they kept their head down, now they have become so emboldened. So I actually put it on my Twitter as well. So the same guy, and there is no doubt that he did it. There have been 2-year-long, multi-year-long investigations by Canada, and based on very, very hard evidence. They found, like, for example, they built the bomb, they went to the forest and they did like a test explosion, they built the ticket, so everything. So the mastermind, his name is Talvinder Singh Parmar. So if you go to Stockton Gurdwara, I put it on my Twitter. So they are venerating him. They are actually equating him to the preceptors of the Sikh faith. So for them, they are like Jesus Christ. So they are like, okay, today we are celebrating the birthday of ex-Sikh Guru, and we are also celebrating the martyrdom day of this Talvinder Parmar. So what kind of monsters would rise out of this? It's a very worrisome thing. And also, like, I have one more point that I would like to underline. This is a giant, immigration fraud. So you basically say Khalistan, and then you get an asylum claim here. And what this terrorist is, when they talk in English, they talk about democracy and human rights. So they speak to their gullible Western audience. But when they speak in their native tongue, they have to have their core supporters. So there they really speak the truth. So I found a video and I subtitled it, and it became like a huge issue. So one of the big Khalistanis, and that time actually he was sitting in the Indian Parliament. He said, yes, I give a letter for money. You take a letter from me that you're a Khalistani and you are being oppressed, and you'll get an asylum in the West. And they were said, okay, like, is there a price? He's like, yeah, there is a fixed price. And then it became such a big news. So some people would not believe. So, a UK publication, they wanted to corroborate it. So they had an undercover reporter, and who would go to this lawyers. He's like, okay, we have like Sikh, he's like not a Khalistani, but he wants an asylum. He's like, I don't care. You say you are a Khalistani, and we will make all these claims that you were sexually tortured, and like now you are suicidal and all these things. So after that, when my report was corroborated in UK, then their prime minister passed a law that India is like on the safe list. So you cannot claim like political or like religious asylum, like you have been persecuted. But it is still going on in the US, and I think you should stamp out. Now I hear something is being done. But all these people who have basically gotten a letter from this fraud in India to get an asylum, I think all their claims should be relooked at. So yeah, it's like, I think that was a summary of what I had to say. If you have questions or anything.
Thank you.
Utsav, did you want to play some more clips?
Yes.
Air India Flight 182, Kanishka, June 29th, 1985, was bombed mid-air. It killed all the 329 occupants. Me at age 30 plus lost both my parents, my beautiful and precious mom and dad. I lost the most expensive gift on earth. My parents, who gave me and would have continued to give us unconditional love. not to say enough of loss of their affection. My kids, their grandkids. This left me and my older siblings with immense grief, trauma, and long-lasting psychological effects on us. We grapple with grief, anger, and fears, and a sense of injustice, especially because that incident involved terrorism. This is painful, this is hard, this is so difficult. So much pain, so much unbearable pains at times.
I live in Cincinnati. I am the victim of terrorism. I cannot forget the morning of June 23, 1985, when I woke up and I heard the news that the Air Canada plane went down, in which I had my brother and his whole family, wife, daughter and son. They all died in that crash. What a horrible day was for me. We cannot imagine what has happened. I sponsored them to come to USA, and they were going to visit India for the first time. And you can imagine what my parents went through when they heard this news. They were going to receive them at the airport in New Delhi. This was a very horrible act, and all of us were going through a lot of pain, and we didn't know how to deal with this loss. It was so hard for us to move on, but life goes on. But how to deal with the situation? I was only 34-year-old. And my family and my parents, we all suffered a lot because of this incident. So I went through the depression, anxiety, and fear all came to me, and I couldn't. Anytime anybody gets late coming home, I will always fear that anything happened to them, some bad news is coming back to me. It was so bad. I stayed all my life in depression and anxiety. So I do not want anybody to go through this like the way I went. Terrorism is very bad. People lose their families, children, kids, and innocent people dies in that terror attack. So I strongly condemn all the act, method and practice of terrorism against any religion, nationality, ethnic groups, or civilian in any form of activities. If any of us can shape any act of terrorism, it will be help to humanity if we can get together and raise the voice against terrorism. That's all I pray for everybody, and that's what I think. Thank you.
I think we can open it up for some questions, if anyone has.
Will somebody? Yeah. Sorry, sir. Sure. Questions? Sir? No, sad. Thank you, sir. Would you like to?
Sure. What is being done to give all the facts to Sikh youth, politicians in America who are being influenced by Khalistani leaders in the West?
Sorry, I didn't.
Actually, nothing.
Youth and okay. So what is being done to give all the facts to Sikh youth and politicians in America who are being influenced by Khalistani leaders in the West?
Like you said, Puneet rightly said, until now, there was nothing being done, and one of the initiatives is for HinduACTion. Like they've had this. We intend to write to various congressmen, senators, and let them know. We also need to have an outreach plan, which is very correct, as he pointed out, for the Sikh youth within Canada, because there's in the USA, because there's a huge mass of negative influence and revisionist history that is going on. And I almost feel like it's treacherous for me to say this, but they keep trying to say that India did it. So I think we need to educate our youngsters at whatever age they are about what actually happened. Bringing facts to the fore would certainly help in a mass education program. More events like this, maybe podcasts and short clips and things like that.
I think
I would like to answer this.
Okay, sure.
Actually, nothing is being done. And like terrorism, like you have to understand how the mindset works. So it's like basically like jihadis. It's all about, wound collectors, like this happened. Like if you see, maybe a little bit on a tangent, like America is the big Satan and, it has done like Muslims a lot of grief. If you actually look, America has supported like this Yugoslav war. America sided with the Muslims. They started bombing Serbia. But their mind doesn't work. It's basically, and also, there is a sociological reasons. So people may not understand, like, for example, not a single guru came from the Jat community. This is a fact. Their contribution in the Sikh scripture, like Gurbani, is next to zero. But almost all the Khalistani terrorists, they came from the Jat community. And now if the vice president of this country, like I was just reading his book, J.D. Vance, he writes, hillbilly elegy. So if he writes his tradition, if you understand, you will understand like the pathologies in the Jat community as well, because it happens because of certain reasons. So they have a tradition of blood feud that you just have to kill, and like this is, so they are just like, they lost, the terrorism lost in India, they came here, and now they have basically brainwashed their kids that you have to take revenge. And to speak against Khalistan was so dangerous 40 years ago. So like, it happened in Canada. On the west coast was this guy, Ujjal Dosanjh, also a Jat, but he understood what was the problem was, and he kept shouting at the Canadians, this is the problem you're doing. He was killed to an inch of his death, and again, the murderer got away because of, like a procedural error. Then on the east coast, there was a Balraj Jol, also a Jat. He tried to explain like what the problem was. But he was beaten to an inch of his, they smashed his skull, they broke both his arm, they broke his leg, they, smashed his hand. And the problem was at that time, they were like, doing low-level jobs. Now they have created a generation who are so brainwashed, and like Muslim Brotherhood, they have infiltrated all organs of the Canadian state. To give you an example, this happened in Canada. This is like the biggest tragedy that happened in Canada. There is nothing in their parliament. But when there was a guy called Hardeep Nijjar, surprising or not unsurprising, also a Jat, he used to stand on his pulpit, and I have put his videos that he'd say like, we did suicide bombings, this is our proud legacy. And he entered Canada by a fake marriage, and he was on a terror watch list. When he got killed, the Canadian Parliament did like a minute of silence. So even you look at, so like you have this Home Department in America. There in Canada in 2018 they brought a report of what are the terror threats. And in that they mentioned, Canadian threat is such a big problem. And, they created such a pressure that there was again, by the way, like a Judge Sikh, his name was Ramesh Sangha. So he understood what the problem was. And he came from a Punjabi constituency. So they understood. So it's not all Sikhs support Khalistan. He came to the parliament by being voted in and by speaking against terrorism. So he said, why are you conflating the Sikhs and Khalistanis? This report is against Khalistan and they are a grave threat. You know what happened to him? He was kicked out. The liberal whites, they told him you are a racist. Imagine the outrageousness of this. So there is a Sikh guy, he is saying yes, that there is a Khalistani terror cult on them. And he is saying because you are speaking against this, even though you are from the same community, even though you are brown, you are a racist. And he was kicked out and his parliamentary career was over and now he runs a law practice. And I can give you many such examples. So it was very dangerous to speak against them 40 years ago. And these people have become much more influential now. And you have to understand how the terror cult works. It's never, because you understand how you work in a democracy. Democracy is give and take. Okay, what are your issues? We do it. But they don't have this thing. They have a tradition of a blood revenge. And it is basically collecting the wounds. So, we take revenge. So people don't have an understanding of what real terrorism is. And that is actually the whole problem.
So I'm just going to take a minute to read something that was written by Canada's High Commissioner to India. The constant stream of protests from the Indian government over objectionable Sikh activities in Canada generated an ongoing and uncomfortable level of stress, not only for myself, but on a trickle-down basis to other members of the mission. Nasty incidents took place across Canada with incursions into Indian consular missions, threats to diplomats, desecration of the Indian flag, and the like. For example, in June, at virtually the same time that I was providing, on instruction from Ottawa, assurances to the Foreign Secretary, Indian Foreign Secretary, with regard to the upgraded security being provided at Indian missions in Canada, an armed gunman walked into the Consulate General in Toronto, fired some shots, and then slipped away unimpeded. Through the late spring and summer of that year, I was summoned to the Foreign Ministry to receive strong protests on some 18 occasions. The situation was so serious that there were even suggestions that India might see itself compelled to withdraw its High Commissioner from Canada in order to emphasize its displeasure and concern. I personally was very understanding of India's anger. Indeed, this anger differed little from my own at what I perceived as the cavalier treatment these protests were receiving at home. My request for a firm explanation as to concrete actions being taken largely remained unanswered. My point to the Canadian authorities was simply enforce the law. That is all that was being asked. You might think that this was written recently, but this was, the time period is 1984. So you can see that from that time to now, nothing has changed.
So,
and if either of you would like to address the 2018 report on the threat of terrorism and how a reference was being taken out.
I'm sure Puneet will do that.
No, it's basically in the end that person was kicked out and the reference was taken out, even though like what it said was based on hard evidence. So you understand you have a pressure group which can basically an upturn. It's not a political statement. It's by a statement by their home department which evaluates terrorist threat. So the security of the Canadian systems is a joke and has to bow down to this terrorists who have infiltrated. Even this guy Niger, it's so fascinating. So he's on a terror watch list. He infiltrates into Canada. They know it. They said he was tortured. The system says this is false. Then he gets married. Then they find out, but he still gets residentship and citizenship in record time. The only thing that means is basically, the Khalistanis have even infiltrated the citizenship department, like what we have USCIS here. So, that is, you just read the trial testimony, it's so fascinating, because they're like, everybody, there were so many Khalistanis, who were really mad at India about what happened in '84. But then they saw this ruthlessness and bloodletting and they turned against them. So for example, I think his name is Sukhminder Grewal. I'm talking from the memory, when they killed the journalist. And he said, can you testify like this guy? He's like, you don't understand what is happening to me. Like, they go like to my family in India and nobody is there to control them. And they're like, okay, you live there and you have your one, sister of your wife. She goes here, we will take care of her. So he was terrified, he was not some like Gandhian, he was a gangster himself. And he was like, we can't do anything. So now we have a question that actually like dovetails, directly into it. So it's asked, can you speak about the threats issued to journalists and others that question the Khalistani narrative, right? So actually we are talking about Terry Milewski and, as much as we can thank him, it's not enough. Let's take the case of Terry Milewski, that guy, he's like a thorough gentleman, you just have to listen to him. He had to live under police protection. Same, like there were only 2 journalists, like it was the biggest event that happened in Canadian history. But only 2 journalists that spoke out and they made their life hell and both had to get police protection, Kim Bolan and Terry Milewski. Now Terry Milewski is a very interesting character because, Canada is a small country and there they have CBC. They don't have many channels, right? And Terry Milewski was the face of CBC. He was not just a journalist. He was the journalist. He was the face of their Canadian television for 40 years. Now when this happens, what? The Khalistanis have so much influence. So for example, whenever there is a Khalistan terror incident or, a diplomatic fracas in India, they book him and the last time, they cancel him. Sorry, we can't have you. Because, we get so much pressure because of the Khalistanis from inside. They get Khalistanis to speak about it. And not just any Khalistanis who are part of the WSO. So, in the WSO inauguration that happened in New York City, Sanjay mentioned that, we will not rest till we kill 50,000 Hindus. They are on record saying this. So they will have a WSO representative on the Canadian television. But the guy who worked for that very same network for 40 years, and he is like the most recognized face in Canada, he's not allowed. So that is how much they have pressure inside the CBC. And again, I would go into the book, how they killed the journalist. They killed the first they crippled him, and then they killed him. And there was another journalist in UK who was basically corroborating that these people had confessed, boasted about doing the plane bombing. He was also killed. So you don't have to kill, hundreds. You have to kill a few, and everybody knows, okay, even these most protected people cannot be protected. Then, and also for example, this journalist who was witness to the confession of this plane bombing. First, they had bombs at his home. Thankfully, he was, and the day he was, finally killed after being crippled. Supposedly cameras should be working, but the cameras were not working on that precise day. So, these people have just infiltrated. So, America is such a grand country, but you see, it lost the war in Afghanistan and because Pakistan had basically offered a safe haven to the terrorists where they organized and where they did all the campaigns. And Canada is basically a Pakistan of the West, where they take, they have a safe haven and they can plan mass murder. And this basically terrorists control this country.
I wanted to, you spoke of educating Sikh youth. This is a point I'd like to just raise. In 2007, after Stephen Harper appointed John Major's commission, and the Ontario school books used to have a chapter on the Air India bombing. Somehow in 2014, when, obviously some forces of politics intervened, they've removed all references to the Air India bombing and Khalistani terrorists from all the school books. This is something that both, whether the US or Canada or, wherever we can, we need to teach our children more about this. About journalists, like Puneet rightfully said, Kim Bolan is a dear friend, and so is Terry. I've known them for now 39 years, from the day of the bombing, literally. They've been interviewing me off and on. I've spoken with them. They've both been inspirations and resources for my books and repositories of information. They both lived under, death threats. Even we have got death threats speaking about it. But there's so many more journalists in Canada or in India, in the US, in North America, who are not so popular or famous as this, the moment you write something against the Khalistani movement or the Khalistanis, you get either sidetracked, you lose your job, or you just, you get death threats or whatever. I met a lady day before yesterday in Toronto, and she's with KONA, which is a Canadian North American organization. She started writing on Twitter as well as articles. She lost 3 jobs in a row, and the Khalistanis just kept lobbying to ensure that she gets nothing. Now she's just a private consultant. This is what they do. So unless Indian / Hindu / nationalist organizations or even fair thinking organizations within this country get together and start telling the stories of how these terrorists bombed this aircraft, and how they're not only this, they've killed thousands of people in India. They have assassinated people all across Canada and North America. They run the entire fentanyl drug trade and the cocaine trade from Colombia and Mexico into the US and Canada. They collect for whether it's arms and ammunition. These guys are the new triad in America, and people, please.
Oh, sorry.
I thought you.
2 questions.
Yes, please.
First, there's a guy from Pakistan, Bilawal Bhutto. He's touring the US. Now, you basically said that Pakistan is equal to Khalistan.
Yes.
Lying aside, what would you like to tell to the Americans about how Pakistanis operate? I mean, providing this safe haven to terrorists, right? And question to you, Puneet. You talked about how the US was gained by this one of the leaders in India providing fake letters for asylum, and President Trump has zero tolerance policy towards terrorism. He's been saying it for all along, saying that we're importing all these gang members and terrorists. Would you or somebody reach out to the administration asking them to look at this, probably FBI Director Kash Patel?
I would love to, and I'm trying to do this on Twitter, and actually it makes a difference. So after just one Khalistani was arrested, and he was also of Babbar Khalsa, the same group that basically bombed the plane, and they, I think, extradited him or they put him in jail. It was so fascinating for this, SFJ turn overnight. They used to put posters of like the Indian chief minister, which is like equivalent to a governor, what you have in America, and they would, bullet hole him, And now suddenly, after one person was elected, they suddenly became Gandhian. They're like, why do you indulge in violence? Why are you bringing bad name to us? So these people are also cowards, and certainly deterrent works. I talked about the Gurpratap Singh Birk case. It was exactly at the same time. Same time they were planning to bomb the plane. Same time they were planning to get Rajiv Gandhi here. But they show, okay, before it happened, you should actually look up on this. His name is Gurpratap Singh Birk. So Birk is pronounced as B-I-R-K. It's you will find, it was written, and the FBI was so strong on that, and they immediately got the message. Okay, you don't mess up around here. You try to do it, you're gonna go in, and you're going for long. And that's what happened, and that's why you did not, have the cases here. And the other, what we were talking, people don't speak about them. I just mentioned earlier, but I just want to underline, you understand the psyche of these people. They are so bloodthirsty that, they have bombed a plane, right? They actually wanted to bomb 2 planes. One of them didn't happen. And most of them were actually women and kids. So on this flight, 84 were kids under the age of 12, because all of them were going for, vacation. So they are not thinking, what the hell did we do? Maybe we sinned. This is what you would think. They are on American wiretaps. So Hamilton conspiracy and Montreal conspiracy. You just Google them, you'll find PTI reports of that time. And they're not just boasting in a very clinical way. So for example, they're planning to bomb the Indian Parliament and destroy the subways, and we will find a Sikh and abduct his kid and kill, and with him try to enter the parliament, and if he doesn't agree, then we will decapitate his child. This is what they're thinking. So we have to bomb the Indian Parliament, and this is months after they have bombed the plane, and we have to bomb another airline from from New York to India. So they are so bloodthirsty and crazy. So there is never point about argument. But the thing is, between a lawyer and a thug, the thug wins on the street. So that's why everybody is silent. Sanjay also pointed out, if you look at the Sikhs, so more than 90% are very proud to be Indians. So there is no question of them. But slowly and slowly, they are capturing more and more, spaces. They are capturing the gurdwaras, and where they basically brainwash the kids. You just have to take a revenge. They show pictures of Sikh suffering. It's exactly what they do in Pakistan. This is happening in Kashmir. You have to go and fight a jihad, and you have to take revenge. Exactly the same. And you have to understand how terrorism works and what are the mindset of the terrorist, and what are the costs you have to set to basically defeat it. And you have to have democracies don't have that in their stomach to actually fight them. To take one example, I'm sorry I'm taking too much time. So in Canada, there is a Ministry of Multiculturalism, right? And they basically fund all these gurdwaras. And India has been complaining about this for 40 years, since when Mrs. Gandhi was alive. So you see how they basically work. They capture a gurdwara. Now they are getting hundreds of thousands of dollars from the Canadian government to do this. This is going into terrorism and their thuggery. Now and they organize this, rallies or protests. So they invite both Democrats and the Republican side, conservative and liberals. Now for them, they don't understand. Like in India, for example, if Ethiopians is fighting with somebody from Sierra Leone, you don't understand what is happening. So they don't understand. For them, it's all the same brown people, right? And they see, okay, these people can gather a large number of people. Let's not speak against them because we need the votes. They don't understand. They are just about winning the election. But you have to make the case that these people are a very grave threat for their own citizens. And what we are dealing with is national security and terrorism. It's not like, your turn goes. Otherwise, civilization collapses.
To answer your question, which you posed to me, what I'd like to, it's ironical. Bilal Bhutto, his own mother was killed by his government, and he's touring the US. He's touring the US, obviously, in response to what Indian government has sent out to clarify its position on Operation Sindoor. But I would like to tell Bilawal and the other Pakistanis, look at what the ISI is doing. The fingerprints are all over. If they have any difficulty, we can share data with them, whether it was Hardeep Nijjar, whether it was Beyant Singh's killer, whether it's Dawood, whether it's the planner of 9/11 was picked up by the CIA from Karachi. So there are a host of them, who are living in Pakistan. If that is not state sponsorship, what is? They're being protected, they're being paid by the ISI, which is, of course, the controlling authority in Pakistan. That's just a hogwash, and I'm sure the current Trump administration is smart enough to see through it. They've already seen through Pakistan's game when we recently had the conflict with Pakistan. They intervened, to save the blushes, because there are probably a lot of assets within Pakistan that did not need to be exposed. But by far and away, we have to understand, look at it from a microscopic view. Very clearly, Pakistan is involved very deeply in the Khalistani and Islamist movement, terrorist movement. Anything that weakens India is what they do. They're also now trying to get their fingers in Bangladesh. China is involved both in Bangladesh as well as in Pakistan, and now preying on Nepal and the other neighboring states. So it's a treacherous neighborhood that I live in India. But that treachery is coming home to North America, and I'm here to tell you and the administration and everyone here that don't foment snakes that will hurt you and kill you in your own backyard and then come to hurt us. And that's the tragedy. We can see that happening left, right, and center, right across, whether it's Canada, whether it's the US, whether it's UK. Don't be so liberal as to permit people to create huge terrorist attacks and assassination attempts. That's what it is.
I'll make a point. If you go to my Twitter handle and if you search for training camps, so it was not just said. So you'll find videos. I've actually posted videos from late 90s And at that time, Afghan jihad was going on. So, these things were not bad in Western capitals. So they used to boast. And they even used to say, call us Mujahideen, we are not terrorists. So I posted videos of terror camps being run on Afghanistan-Pakistan border, which were being attended by these Khalistanis. And a lot of Khalistanis, because they are being interviewed where you have come from. So they're actually from UK and Canada. So these terrorists from UK and Canada were taking terrorist training in Afghanistan-Pakistan border, and then they came to India and did like acts of mass murder. So we have clear evidence of that.
Okay, I think we're just going to take one final question before we wrap up.
One of my friends, she's Hindu, and her son, he's a doctor, and he was going to marry, and he has a Sikh girl, right? And that's very common these days, right?
Yes.
But the unusual thing that they did is, and I don't know if it is usual now, this was about 15 years ago, they gave the son-in-law to be, the bride's parents, gave him a book that showed that Khalistanis didn't, terrorize and bring the plane down, but it was government of India. So how can you counter that? Because this is mainstream now.
Yes.
This is mainstream. They are doing this.
So to answer your point, the book you're talking about is Soft Target, and unfortunately it's banned in India, but I did get a copy. I wish it wasn't, because it's very important to correct the narrative. And that's what I've been trying to do. I know Puneet does it very well, so does Terry. They're all far ahead of me. But as a victim or as a survivor, as I call myself, of this tragedy, pardon my French, it's absolute crap. That particular book I have read through, and I have debated against Khalistanis on Twitter Spaces and told them it's rubbish. I was in Canada a couple of days ago, and I challenged them openly on a TV channel, as well as Sukh Dhaliwal, who wants the new inquiry, that entire book is revisionist rubbish. I've written one book, I'm writing my second book, which will unravel all this nonsense that they've put, simply because they're trying to whitewash themselves of the blood of these 82 children and the 331 and the thousands that they killed in the Punjab. They're now looking at becoming a mainstream political organization. They're trying to shed their gangster image, their terrorist image, their cult image. But the entire book is rubbish. I know of the book. It's a small booklet. And they also bring up ex-CSIS head, Juno Katsu, who's a known Pakistani, pro-Pakistani, anti-Indian baiter. So you get a lot of this. There are a lot of people out there. But as long as we, as Hindus, as Indians, as American Indians, as right-minded people, even if you're American, white American, as long as you keep silent against this propaganda, it's always going to grow. I mean, I would be blasphemous to say it's almost like a group saying that there weren't 6 million Jews that got gassed in Auschwitz. It's like that. To even imagine that the Indian government would blow up its own aircraft out of Canada. I mean, you've got even the Canadian people, politicians, who have admitted this was a Canadian tragedy perpetrated by Canadians, a bomb made in Canada, and that blew up out of Canada. So they're all Canadians. Let's understand that.
Puneet?
Yeah, so actually it's very interesting. So in 9/11 happened, and we had the 9/11 Commission. So in Canada this happened, and they had a retired Justice of the Supreme Court, John Major, and his commission. So what is very interesting is, that commission has basically said the Babbar Khalsa and Khalistani terrorists of Talwinder Parmar have done it, right? And what is so interesting, it's in a way shameful also. We find so much of this evidence not because of 329 that were killed. Actually, there was another bomb that was supposed to go off from Japan, but that fell on the ground, and the Japanese investigation was so strong that they found, from where they had got this transistor bomb. That was from Inderjeet Rayat, who was convicted, because he had basically purchased from where they found the tape that was used to roll around from his home. So the evidence against him is completely, and you see how Khalistanis, I was talking about WSO. When this commission was going on, they again tried to push that the Indian government has done it. And, and these people are so shameful, and, they get away with something. So imagine like Al-Qaeda is saying, no, it was an inside job. What they even dared to do was falsify the lie in name of an investigator. So there was an investigator by the name of Gary Bass. And, he said he is not. So then, basically, Gary Bass had said nothing of that sort. John Major looked at that, then this is nonsense. And they actually have written that these people have, are wasting our time and trying to mislead us. These people are speaking. But again, there are no cost. The John Major reports that these people are trying to mislead and, presenting all side of nonsense. They are lying in the name of the investigation. But okay, good, he gentlemanly made a comment, but there are no cost to do these things. Just imagine. There is a 9/11 that has happened, and there is a 9/11 commission that is happening, and these guys, Al-Qaeda or Muslim Brotherhood, tries to, mislead the investigation, but there are no cost to it. Again, the report is out. Read the John Major report. It's completely, Talvinder Parmar was the mastermind and the instigator of this atrocity. It was done by Babbar Khalsa Khalistani Sikh terrorists.
And at the time, they did claim
that's why his posters are up in all their in their gurdwaras. Why do they take Talvinder Singh Parmar's poster out on the floats?
Yeah. Garland.
Because he's the Shaheed who killed 331. The other point is, like Puneet says, if you open the John Major executive summary, Justice John, and I was part of that. On page 3 itself, he says, and I quote, "I wish the World Sikh Organization had spent more time promoting the cause of justice and the Sikhs rather than trying to pin this on the Indian government." This is back in 2010, not today. So today they're trying to revise because people have forgotten John Major, people have forgotten the evidence that came out. So it's absolutely cut and dry, and we will, with events like this, hopefully clear the air, because the newer generation, my children or your grandchildren won't know the truth, and like you say, they'll be getting booklets like this, propagating nonsense. We need to let the word spread, like he rightfully said, address Sikh youth, address Indian youth, address American youth. So many people haven't even heard of it. Like he spoke of Angus Reid report. 4 out of 5 Canadians haven't heard of it. Let me tell you, 4 out of 5 Indians also haven't heard of it. I make no bones. It's not that, the Canadians don't know, but every Indian knows. They don't even remember Kanishka. They don't remember Air India. And the thing is that, in civilization, we are destined to commit the mistakes. If we forget, we are condemned if we forget our history. So that's very important. Thank you very much, all of y'all.
Thank you all for coming. Thank you, Sanjay and Puneet, and thank you.
And get my book on Amazon. It's on Kindle. I think it's free in India. I don't know if it's free here, but please get it. It's on Angel's Wings, and it deals with the bombing and my part in the inquiry and things like that. Yeah.
And thank you for HinduACTion.
Thank you, HinduACTion. Thank you to both of you all. Thank you so much. I'm really honored to have been here with you.
Thank you.
Please, sir, you wanted to say something? Okay. Thank you to you, Poonam, and to Puneet. Thank you, and to Terry, of course.